14 minutes after 7 o'clock, well, members of the New Brunswick legislature will probably see their pension plans rolled back later this year. Premier David Alward says he will accept the recommendations in an independent report released yesterday. In 2008, during some of the worst spring flooding in the province's history, MLAs voted for a series of changes to their pay structure, including one of the richest retirement packages ever seen. Yesterday's report was written by former Judge Jean-Claude Anger and two former senior civil servants. When reporters caught up with David Alward, he said it would take some time for government members to study the report, but that action would be taken as soon as possible. Here's part of what the Premier had to say.
I can tell you that in principle, we will accept the recommendations that are brought forward, although I have not had an opportunity to go through them, to read them, nor our caucus. This week we'll be having a caucus retreat in Campbellton in the coming days, and this will be certainly a point of discussion, and we will be prepared to bring forward legislation this session.
Will you adopt it 100%, whatever it says?
Again, I hope that people will give myself and our caucus and other MLAs an opportunity to review it. What I can assure New Brunswickers is I take it very seriously. We all take it seriously. We'll be moving very quickly to bring legislation forward to deal with it.
Years ago, when there would be changes to members' pension plans here and in Ottawa, it would take effect often after the next election. But in 2008, the changes that were made affected the then current MLAs. Will these changes apply to current MLAs, or will it only take effect after a subsequent election?
And again, I don't know what is in the recommendations. I expect to move forward, and one of the expectations from New Brunswickers that I believe is that the message has been it needs to be dealt with now. We were very clear as a party during the campaign that we would deal with it now, and that's my expectation as we go forward. I have no desire to put this off into the future. We'll deal with it now.
This came up a lot during the election campaign, and then during budget consultations, the MLA pensions were raised several times. How do you think New Brunswickers who have expressed those views will react to what this says, just based on whatever information you have now?
What I can say is my understanding is it certainly will see a reduction in the level of pensions. My understanding is it will have implications on severance package as well, and because of that, I believe expectations of New Brunswickers will certainly it will move in that direction. Ultimately, it's for individual New Brunswickers to make a decision whether they believe it adequately reflects their expectations.
This has been a long time coming. Did all the MLAs that sat in the House on that day in April 2008, did they make a mistake, and did they all sort of bear a black eye to this point?
Look, the decision that was taken back in 2008, there had been years really since the issue had been looked at. There was a lack of transparency in how MLAs were paid. There was that's why the commissioner was given that responsibility. In 2008, the day that the recommendations came forward, there were two parts to it. One was the salary piece, which what it did was brought transparency to monies that MLAs were receiving. The second part was the fact that he did not feel that he was in position to make recommendations on the pension. His recommendation was in a timely fashion to do that review. That review did not take place, and I'm certainly disappointed in a timely enough fashion. I'm disappointed that didn't take place, but it has now. I can't change that past. What we can do is commit to deal with it as we go forward in a very timely fashion.
That was New Brunswick Premier David Alward speaking with reporters yesterday in Fredericton. And joining me now is someone who has been following the MLA pension issue very closely. Robert Jones, as you know, is a CBC reporter based in St. John. Morning, Robert.
Morning, Jerry.
Okay, so one of the big stories, the biggest story we're dealing with today is the result of a story that you broke back in 2008, that the MLAs had very quietly voted themselves a huge increase to their pensions while everyone in the provincial capital was worried about flooding. Now, this report has come out suggesting that the increases be rolled back partially. What's your assessment of how significant that recommended rollback is?
Well, the rollbacks are pretty significant. I went through it last evening. I get, in percentage terms, if you look at all the increases that MLAs voted themselves, this proposes to eliminate about 70% of them. So at the end of the day, MLAs will have richer pensions than they had 3 years ago, about 25% richer, but most of the increases that they voted themselves, the majority of them, will be gone if this report gets, adopted in full.
Now, if I was sitting in the legislature, I might be thinking, gee, they're going to come in with a plan to reduce my pension by a third in a short time. Maybe I should just resign now and keep the pension I have.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of these assessments made. We don't know how this will be introduced and whether MLAs would be able to escape, but certainly there's MLAs, any MLA who's got 8, 10, 12, 20 years in the legislature is looking at a significant reduction. For example, you take Conservative MLA Bev Harrison, today he could retire on a pension of $80,000 a year. I mean, these proposals are to cap pensions at $63,000. So if you could retire today, take the pension that's currently in force before the new legislation comes forward, would you do it? That's a question that a lot of MLAs are facing. You take former Premier Sean Graham, who's kind of indicated that he's not going to continue forever as an MLA. He's already accumulated $50,000 a year in pension benefits just as an MLA, not counting his pension as Premier. That'll be reduced by a third, if he stays an extra year or two. Would somebody like him decide he wanted to quit early? But a lot of that depends on how the legislation's put together. If they put it together so that it applies retroactively, there's nothing you can do to save yourself. Then MLAs, I guess, will just have to live with these recommendations as is.
Okay, so if they made it retroactive, then that would really deny anyone an opportunity to take advantage of the original windfall, correct?
Yeah, and there's a couple of issues there. Number one is, can they sell this to the individual MLAs? I remember back in the mid-1990s, the government of Premier Frank McKenna decided it was going to tackle pension reform, and it was going to institute an age restriction on getting a pension. At the time, you could retire at 45 or 50 and go on a full pension immediately, and they decided to set a 60-year, you had to be 60 years old to collect a full pension. Well, the MLAs rebelled. They wouldn't go for it, and they had to write in a loophole where you could exempt yourself from the legislation as a sitting MLA. Ultimately, even the Premier Frank McKenna exempted himself. It was so unpopular amongst the MLAs. Will that kind of thing happen this time? Will they pass all these reforms and then say, okay, we can't enforce it on people who are elected under the old rules, so you can exempt yourself from it? We have seen that before, and we got to keep an eye out for that. Or if they don't do that, if they do make it apply retroactively, how retroactively? Will it apply to MLAs who retired prior to the election? You have MLAs out there like Larry Kennedy, who's collecting a $74,000 a year pension. Will he be rolled back to the maximum at 64? And can't it be done that way? We don't know these things. We don't know how individual MLAs will react to this in the legislature, and ultimately you need their votes to pass this kind of reform, and we don't know how serious the government is. Will it try to go back in time and fix this even for MLAs who've already quit?
I suppose the Premier could come out and say to his caucus, you have to vote in support of this and demand that they vote to accept the revision.
Yeah, but rarely on pay issues do do we see that happening? They really like unanimity on these issues because it's so sensitive with the public. If you get one party backing reform and another party opposing it, it's political poison for you, really. They really like to get together in a room, and it's how they did it originally, come to a quiet agreement amongst themselves, and pass this stuff unanimously. The question is, because we've never seen a significant rollback of benefits for MLAs like is being proposed here. We've never seen MLAs go for that, and it'll be interesting to see if everybody does agree to it.
Yeah, well, it's going to be an interesting story to follow. Robert, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye. That's the CBC's Robert Jones. Now, what do you think about what